Hi, everybody. In this Turn It Around series, we've got a very interesting personality, Mr. Kim Warren, who has been a strategic consultant, who's consulted with companies large and small across his 3 to 4 decades plus of industry experience. He started off as a strategic consultant for 15 years, consulting with various companies. And the next 20 years, he was with the London Business School, teaching people on how to model business and the framework called strategic management dynamics, on which he's written a book as well. So he's a writer, author, and prolific publisher of works on business models. And he is now consult. He spends his time consulting and teaching and mentoring people on how to use his models for creating predictable business models. And I think the world needs more of that now as we go through the COVID pandemic, which has upset all kinds of predictions. And we're trying to look at some kind of predictability in the market. I'm sure we will all benefit from his session on how do you arrive at predictable statistics in the world, in a very unpredictable world, which is upset most because of the pandemic. So welcome, Kim, to this series, and please walk us through, how and just to add, he's also a PhD from the London School of Business, and he's got a management degree from there as well. And so please walk us through your journey on what has taken you over the years, and how did you get into strategic management dynamics, and
Sure,
what was your journey all like?
sure. Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you, Kieran. It's a real pleasure to be talking to you and through you to your many followers. Um, I have only somewhat come into contact with the IT and the IS strategy field. Um, but the work I've done on strategy, particularly in recent years, I think has some real value to offer to people with a focus on the IT support for enterprise. So I started teaching the standard strategy materials at London Business School when I joined there many years ago. But those tools, to be honest, were not really very useful because they didn't tell you kind of what to do, when, and how much. Basically, what they said is, it would be a good idea if you are differentiated from some other company. It would be a good idea if you position your business in this way rather than that way. And on top of that, there was some theory about how you build business resources, but it wasn't very practical. But I met with a professor who'd been taught at MIT about this method called system dynamics. And just to be clear what it is, system dynamics.
Just to interrupt you, I think.
Sure.
Came so the system dynamics is the one which was created by Jay Forrester, the same thing, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yes, that I was just going on to explain exactly that. So system dynamics is a method. It comes from engineering control theory, and what Professor Forrester at MIT did was he moved the principles of engineering control theory and said, well, instead of engineering a mechanical system, we're engineering an enterprise, right? So we use the same principles to design it and to manage it that we should use to design and manage any working system. So what that allows you to do is build working simulations. So what I've spent the last many years trying to do is to translate what is seen as a very kind of technical approach to this kind of simulation into something that's much more practical, that managers and leaders and executives can get their heads around and actually use it. And where I get to with this is something we called a dynamic business model, which follows absolutely rigorously the principles of system dynamics, but expressed in managerial terms and managerial language, and connected to the kind of real information about the business. So what a dynamic business model is it is a working, quantified, time-based simulation of any business issue or any business plan. So that could be a business plan for a whole organization. It could be a human resources plan. It could be a model of how to enter a new market, or how to fight off a competitor who's got some new attack they're making on you. Or it could be something really very local and very functional specific, like how to fix service quality, for example. And where we've got to with this is that it turns out there are a lot of very standard models, very standard structures. One I quite commonly use, because everybody understands it, is a dynamic model of a restaurant, a local restaurant serving meals at tables to people who come to the restaurant. And that model fits every table service restaurant in the world, every single one. There isn't an exception. If it's an exception, then it isn't a table service restaurant, right? It's something else. It's got a menu, it's got customers in the local area, it's got the staff who serve the customers, it's got the menu, and every restaurant fits that model. So what that means is that these models are relatively simple to develop, because very often you're simply modifying something that already exists and is very well proven. Now, a problem has been that the phrase business model is very widely used in management and consultants. So if you look up business model on the web, you'll get kind of millions of answers to that. And it's one of these management phrases that is used completely indiscriminately, and people mean all kinds of different things with it. Usually what they mean is a qualitative description, a verbal description of what the business does and how it works. Very often on little more than a page or a few PowerPoint slides. There are no numbers on it, there's no explanation, there's no rigorous explanation of how the thing actually works. So when people say, tell us about your business model, that's usually what they mean. They do not mean what I'm talking about here, which is a working quantified simulation. And to be frank, many people I explain this to, that they simply don't believe it can be done. How could you possibly simulate something as complicated as a business? Well, somebody designed the business to work in a certain way in the first place. So why should it be so complicated? Actually, it isn't. It isn't so complicated. What we've got then is a very, very useful tool. And the tool can be used for a number of related purposes. And if we kind of go sequentially through those purposes, a very first thing you might want to do is build a simulation model of something that hasn't happened yet. So I'm going to start a new business. Let me build a model of a new business. Where am I? How many customers are there out there? Where are they going to come from? How fast am I going to acquire them? How fast are they going to build? How is that going to feed through to growing sales and so on? Alongside that, how many people am I going to have to hire? So what's going to happen to the number of people over time? What does that do to my capacity to produce my product or to support those customers, and so on? So that's the first thing you do before anything has happened. You simulate it. That's what we do with everything else, right? Anything else that's complicated, we model it beforehand.
So it's easier to fail on paper than in practice. Actually, they say the cost of failure is cheap.
Well, that's what people think, isn't it? They think that simulation is difficult to do. Well, maybe it was once upon a time, but it's not difficult to do now. This is perfectly practical for reasonably skilled analysts and consultants can do this. So once you've done that, you've got this model of how you hope the future would play out. It could be your plan for the new business, or it could be your plan to enter a new market, or it could be a plan to improve a service quality problem that you've got. You've got how you think the thing should play out. As soon as you start doing something, you start getting data in about how the system actually does work. And that you put back into the model, and you constantly improve it and update it for the way things change. So, oh, look, it looks like people are being attracted to my product twice as fast as I thought they would be. Oh, well, what does that mean? Well, that means I'm going to have to hire people at twice the rate that I thought I was going to hire. Oh, no, but I can't find people that fast. So, oh, maybe I just better pull back on my marketing expenditure so I don't pull in more customers than I can handle. That's the kind of thing that you can do with it. So you're constantly updating the model as you go.
You're mixing both control theory and business acumen together in this framework.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a model of how the business system works. The control theory is telling us about how the decisions,
the feedback mechanism, the open loop, the closed loops, all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and a really important thing that these models do, other types of business model, your friends may have come across something called business model canvas, balanced scorecards, that kind of thing. Those two are mostly qualitative, although business model, they're not mostly qualitative. That they don't have the rigor in terms of specifying what the elements of the system actually are and matching them to the data of what the business actually has.
I think in your framework, looks like you're opening the gut of the business and exposing all the numbers on a visual dashboard, and it's all there for you to see how it really interacts because
absolutely
in real time, that kind of stuff.
So I think where we try to get to when we're building these models, if we're modeling something that's already in progress and has got some history to it, we make sure that the model matches the history, not just the results, but everything that generates the results. So it's not enough that we've got a profit time chart that matches the actual profit we've achieved or sales that we've achieved. Everything else has got to match as well. How many customers we've had, how many staff we've had, how much marketing we've spent, what price changes we've made. I was given some advice early in my work on business models by somebody very experienced in the field, and he said, young man, he said, because I was a relatively young man at the time, young man, he said, a decent model will do what the real world does, and it will do it for the same reasons, right? So if you think about spreadsheet models and econometric models and statistical models, they may fit the results. So you may get a correlation between the results from the model and what you're actually seeing, but they definitely don't explain everything else in the system. It's almost kind of statistical coincidence if they happen to produce something like that. So our models. So what we're effectively trying to do is we're trying to mimic reality. And in the last year or two, I've become increasingly confident that we can now generate what is effectively a digital twin of the enterprise. And I have one colleague, a business founder, who's used this approach on his business, whose business model mimics exactly week to week to week how the business has actually performed. So it's not a digital twin in the sense of the kind of digital twin that General Electric provide when they sell you a piece of complicated engineering equipment or something of that kind. We're not mimicking every single detail, every second of every transaction, but we are mimicking, this is what happened this week in the model, this is what happened in the real world on everything in business. So I'm perhaps slightly overstating when I say this is a digital twin, but not by much.
I get the point. So because in a digital twin, as you said, all the sensory inputs map onto one-on-one and real time, it's happening. But here you're saying at least a snapshot of the last 1 week kind of a thing. It's like a near digital twin in terms of the business model, not from the industry inputs and so on. But one question I think. Yeah, one
Okay.
question Kim I had before we go to the other one was how much of your history thing is going to make how it's going to help, because they say history repeats itself. So when we say okay, this is how we performed in the last couple of years, so history in today's digital world need not be an indicator for tomorrow's progress. Like BlackBerry was the leader in 2009. By 2011 they filed for bankruptcy.
Mm,
And I've worked myself in certain companies. Every year we used to have four different CEOs, and the performance of the company was completely different every single year. So, how
yeah,
much of that predictability thing do you think is going to make sense when we are actually modeling it? Of course,
yeah,
in a steady performing company, it makes a lot of sense because okay, we can say this is how it is, and we can predict the future growth. But
sure,
in a
sure.
volatile
Well,
environment, how does it work?
yeah. Well, that's a great question, actually. Another part of my professional career, actually, before I joined London Business School, um, involved strategic planning, and it involved a particular tool we used a lot at that time was scenario planning. Um, and in scenario planning, what you do is you hypothesize. Uh,
Just to interrupt you a bit, Kim, I think maybe you just need to adjust the lighting a bit because it was bright in the beginning. So on your face, actually, the background is pretty okay. But
oh,
yeah, I think you probably need to position the light a bit closer to you or something like that.
has that helped at all?
No, it's kind of, I don't know whether it is very cloudy over there.
No,
It
not at all.
was, yeah, I don't know. Probably
Um,
some light
I,
source at your side could really help.
I,
Otherwise,
well,
I think
that's
okay,
what I've got.
okay, it doesn't matter. So I'll probably edit it in the post edit. I could boost up a bit of it.
I don't
Uh,
know what to do about
the
that.
other day it was really great. The first time we had the first talk, it was really good. But it doesn't matter. If you got some light source, you could keep at the side. I think it'll be great.
If I make the background less bright, maybe I get more bright.
Yes, yes, yeah. I think it kind of helps. It helps
Oh,
to some extent. Yes, definitely.
good, good, good. Okay. So you were talking about uncertainties and
Yeah,
how
yeah, yeah. How
something
much
that
of
it's a
history is influencing future decisions? Yeah.
yeah. So as I say, in my career before London Business School, I was involved in strategic planning for what is now the UK's largest hospitality group company called Whitbread. They built the business called Costa Coffee, which they've recently sold to Coca-Cola. Now, I was involved in the strategic planning for that group of companies, and we use a method called scenario planning. And in scenario planning, what you do is you hypothesize things that could change in the world around you. And what I would now do, I couldn't do it then, but what I would now do is I would say, well, let's see what would happen if this uncertain thing that could happen actually hit our business, right? And what would we have to do to protect ourselves against that shock there? So BlackBerry basically got overtaken by better technology, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah.
And don't forget, of course, that there are some wars that you are definitely going to lose. Like Kodak was never going to survive as a photographic film company, right?
True,
It was
true.
never going to. That was
Yeah,
not a possibility.
Even Nokia, for instance,
Yeah,
Blockbuster, all these
exactly.
guys. Yeah,
On the more optimistic side, and this is something that many more organisations should remember. Strategic management is about making your own future. The companies we admire made the world the way it is. They didn't sit there and say, "Oh, I wonder what's going to happen to us." They made the world the way it is. The world is the way it is today because Bill Gates made it like this, and Jack Welch made it like this, and Jeff Bezos made it like this. Right? They didn't wait. They didn't rely on forecasts. Right? So in our models, we project how the business is likely to progress under business as usual conditions, and then we hit it with uncertainties, and we hit it with different strategies, and we say, well, how can we protect ourselves against this risk, or how can we take this new opportunity and lift the performance to a new level? So this is a very, very powerful thing we can do now. It really is. So
we can inject uncertainty into the framework, is what you're saying, and can
oh
see the
yeah,
different behavior.
oh yeah, easy. Yeah, that's child's play to do that.
Okay.
One thing I did just want to do before I forget is just mention the relationship between this approach to simulation modeling and others that your audience may be familiar with. So a much more widely known and widely used simulation method is discrete event simulation, right? Any organization that's going to build a production system or a supply chain or a warehousing thing or whatever, they wouldn't dream of building one of those without doing a discrete event simulation of how this thing is supposed to work. And your audience may also be familiar with agent-based models, where, for example, you're watching people moving through a 3D built environment space to see what would happen to crowd flows if there was a fire or something, that kind of thing, agent-based models. And I've seen some extremely sophisticated models of 3D models of warehouse operations where you're actually watching precisely what's happening to every package moving through every layer of this complicated thing. Now, system dynamics doesn't attempt to do what discrete event and agent-based modeling do, because what both of those do is they track every event happening to every element in the model. What system dynamics does is it models populations of things. So we model what happens to all of the staff, or all of the accounting staff, all of the customers, or all of the large customers, all of the small customers. So we're modeling populations rather than individual entities, and we're modeling periods of time. We're not modeling real time every instant. That's why I said I'm stopping just a little bit short of claiming a digital twin here. A digital twin would track every sale by every customer every minute of every day, right? The system dynamics model would track the sales this week. Or we could go down to a day. We could say, well, what's happened to the total sales the latest day. So we can choose what the time periods of the model are. That sounds like we're throwing a lot away by not tracking every detail of everything, but we're gaining a huge amount as well, because it means we can make very comprehensive models that are really quite small, and on top of that, they're very easy to understand because you're just looking at the big picture. We can build a dynamic business model that is more reliable, more useful, and we can do it much faster than anything you could build with a spreadsheet. Right? We should not be using spreadsheets for time-based modeling. We shouldn't.
Okay, so I think my next question would be, how could the architects in IT or decision makers or enterprise architects use this body of knowledge to create predictability in their environments? So if you've got some slides that you can show us through, I will turn to you.
Yeah.
I'll make you the presenter so you could share your slides and we can walk that.
Yeah. Okay.
You're the host now. Yes, you're the host. You could do a screen share.
Yeah, I'll do that in just a moment. So the IT field needs the strategy of the organization to be well designed and well managed. They need to know what it is. The tool that I understand that the field has built to do this is the enterprise architecture. So enterprise architecture and system dynamics that they are different, but I've looked into this in quite some detail. Some people from the Open Group were interested in this a few years back. That they are different, but they are definitely related. And let me see if I can explain and illustrate what the differences are and the relationships between them. So when you build an enterprise architecture, what you're doing is you're describing how the processes that the organization undertakes work on the things and the stuff that drive performance. So how do processes act on orders placed or people hired, that kind of thing, on customers onboarded. So enterprise architectures rely on these process diagrams of how activities work on the things and stuff in the business. What System Dynamics does is it actually says what happens to the things and the stuff themselves that drive that performance and on which the processes act. So we're actually tracking what's happening to the orders, the customers, the people. And it's not just what happens in principle to them, it is what happens quantitatively over time to them. Now, I have actually put this, there's a recording of the full presentation I gave to the Open Group, and I've put the link in here, and you're very welcome to share that link.
Sure. Yeah, I will share that once, at the bottom of this video I shall be sharing,
Right, but that's the relationship between them. So let me try to explain that with a little example. Well, first of all, let me say where this would fit in the Open Group architecture framework method. All right, so this is, well, it was at the time as I looked at it, this was the agenda, if you like, of the TOGAF method. So there's an introduction piece, and then part two is you've got to go through the architecture development method in order to arrive at an architecture, right? And this is a quote from what TOGAF actually says. It says, "The business architecture is a prerequisite for work in any other domain. Process models describe the functions associated with the enterprise's business activities." All right?
Yeah.
Now, that's a very clear explanation, very clear definition. And in its own context, it can, and I guess mostly is, done very rigorously, right? Later on, when you get to the architecture content framework, it's the TOGAF then asks you to assess the organization's capabilities. So what is the capability level of the enterprise as a whole? Where does the enterprise wish to raise capability? Now, capability is another of these awful managerial words that is very widely abused and used, taken to mean all kinds of different things. But in our terms, it means very simply, how well do you do the processes, right? Now, what do we mean by doing it well? It means how quickly do we do it? How well in quality terms do we do it? And at how low cost. So if you take a capability of hiring people, for example, that would be, do we hire people with the skills and experience that we want? So that is, are we hiring the right quality of people? Do we do it quickly? You know, if we say we want somebody in 2 weeks, do we get them in 2 weeks, or do we have to wait for 2 months? And what do we spend on hiring them? You know, we spend a lot of money on job advertisements and interviewing and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we mean by capability. And there is a piece of my dynamic business model method that explicitly models capability, right? Very explicitly. It's very clear on what a capability is made up of and what the measures are of how good it is. So
it could be a function of people, process, or technology, right? When you say capability assessment, it could be a function of any of these.
very specifically, assuming that you actually have enough of the people that you need for a process to be done well, then it's actually slightly, a capability is wider than a single process. It tends to be a collection of processes that together accomplish something, right? So in order to have a high capability, you have to have enough of the people necessary to do it. Those people have to have the skills that they need in order to do it. They need the data and the information required to enable them to do it. And they need efficient and effective processes in order for them to get that task done. Okay, now every one of those things is an entity in a dynamic business model that we can specify and quantify and track over time. Right, we can do all of those things. So that's where this tool could contribute to the architecture framework that people already use it in IT strategy work, right?
Yeah.
So what we need to know then is, where do processes and capabilities fit in an SD model, so we can understand what a system dynamics model could contribute. So let me just take one pretty simple capability to illustrate this. And what we're looking at here is how well a customer support function works. All right, this is intentionally a simple operational capability I'm looking at here. I'm avoiding the complications of going up to the kind of big strategic capabilities that I quite often model for organizations. That I've deliberately chosen the clearest, simplest example I can for this. So here's an organization. I think this is taken from an insurance company example. It's got nearly 500,000 customers at this particular point in time. We're going to simulate this over 24 months, right? At the point in time we're looking at, we've got 490,000 customers. We're winning 2,000 a month, but we're losing 2,200 per month. So next month, the number will be lower by 200. Why is that happening? We're losing customers at that rate because the call center is experiencing a call overload. So those customers are making calls at a certain rate. 10% of them call each month. So we're getting incoming calls of 49,000 per month. What can the staff cope with? Well, the staff, there's 60 staff, and between them, they can handle a maximum of 47,000 calls per month. Now, what can we do? Well, we can hire more staff. So we can hire or lose plus or minus some number each month. It could be 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever number management chooses in their hiring policy. Now, that number of 47,000 is not the maximum number that a perfectly capable call center operation could handle. If they had all the data they need, all the skills they need, the most effective procedures that you could possibly imagine, then they could handle nearly 4 times that number. They could handle 180,000 calls per month.
Sorry, Kim. How was that the 4 times possible? Can you just repeat that part?
Well, that's what I'm coming to. So, if theoretically the maximum possible rate would be 180,000, okay, why are we only handling 47,000? Well, the first reason is that the people that we've got have not got all of the skills that they could have to do this, right? So we train people when they come in. So it could be that this organization has had a very high turnover of staff, and they're training people as fast as they can, but they simply haven't got all of the skills that they need to do that job. So we can quantify what that is. Anyone running a call center will know that there is a kind of catalog of the skills that the people answering calls need to have. And there are some very routine skills, like every hour of every day, calls will be coming in with these kinds of questions, and these are the skills that people need to handle those. Problem is that there are some less common questions that come in that not every call center person knows how to answer, and they become problems because that person struggles to answer them. They put you onto somebody else, they struggle to answer the question, and so on. So if the people you've got in your call center haven't got the skills, then you're not going to answer as many of the calls as you could. And in all of this, 100% is not possible, right? It just isn't possible ever, right? So we're trying to build each of these resources up to the level that we would like them to be at, but we're never going to get there. Then we can choose to spend some extra time on each call to actually collect more data from customers. Customer data goes out of date. So, while you're on, sir or madam, could we just update your contact telephone number, for example, right? So you're not handling 180,000 calls per month, partly because the people haven't got all the skills they need, and partly because they're spending some of that time not answering the question, but actually getting more customer data. Then we haven't codified all of the procedures, right? Codifying procedures takes a lot of work and a lot of effort, and the procedures change. People launch new products, and this department has not yet got the procedures necessary to support this new product. We don't know how to answer a question about this because we've only just launched the product and we don't know. So again, we can never document all of the procedures, but we try to document the most common ones that we possibly could. Now, you're exactly right to challenge me on this, Kieran. This is a very low level of capability, only being able to handle a quarter of the call volume that is theoretically possible is a very low capability indeed, right? But as I say, we would never get to 100% anyway. So what is this procedure that we're looking at here? Well, somebody calls in, you hear the specific request, you go and find the necessary data to resolve the request, you resolve the request and end the call. That is a procedure. That in your enterprise architecture, that would be one of the processes that gets captured in the enterprise architecture. Right? Now what we can do is that we can simulate everything I've shown you on that screen. Right? We can simulate what would happen if we put more time onto collecting data, if we put more time onto documenting procedures, if we hired more staff. And have I included? No, I'll give you a link to a working model. In fact, can I pause and just and try and track that down for you right now, Kieran? Is that all right?
Yeah, no problem.
Let me just see if I can.
It's going to take time. I'll just pause the recording, Kim, so that you can be relaxed and search for it.
I think what I'll do, Kieran,
I'll pause the recording. You can search peacefully, no problem.
Okay.
So you let me know once you got it. I'll start.
So what your audience will be able to do when they access this model is they'll be actually able to play with some of these decisions in the model. Okay. Now, so
one question I had came on the previous one. I think that's too much of an overstretch for me to ask. But let us say the people were leaving the call center. Customers were drifting away because of poor communication lines or choppy bandwidth, voice. So how does this guy take care of that user experience side of things? So I'm sure this model only takes care of the other aspects, right? You can't get into those things for which probably you might need to do design thinking or some other stuff with the customer.
Well, if you have bandwidth limitations or other reasons why the actual call connection itself is unreliable, then the reliability of the call is itself a variable in this model.
Okay.
So we would have and that variable would be specified very, very carefully. It would be some variable such as the percentage of incoming calls that drop because of connection problems. So if that number was 2%, then that would be a number that would be in this model.
Okay. So there's a possibility to bring those kind of additional attributes
absolutely
that affect the decision making. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. So we another part of the method specifies exactly what intangible factors are. So we handle things like we've got one here already actually, which is skills, but we can handle things like customer reputation or customer annoyance levels. We can handle
customer
staff
satisfaction or the wow
yeah,
factor with
staff morale. We
Right.
can handle the reliability of equipment. We can handle the number and the seriousness of bugs in software. That they can all be represented in these models.
Okay, perfect.
So you basically stop modeling when you've answered everything you need to answer, right?
Okay. So basically, there's a scope to bring in the intangibles also in the model to make it correct.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe we'll say a little bit more about that in the second interview that we do.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So that in principle is how a system dynamic model might contribute to and connect with a process-based enterprise architecture model of an organization. So if we look at this is a diagram of the architecture development method as specified by the Open Group. So you start up at the top there, you define what the scope of the enterprise architecture actually needs to be. You articulate the vision of the organization, where the organization wants to get to in terms of how many customers it's going to have in 5 years' time, how much profit it hopes to make, and those kinds of things. But the real place that this contributes is at step B in the process, which is that alongside building your process-based architecture, you build a working, quantified model of how the business actually performs. And that gives you a rock-solid platform, not just for the strategy of the organization, but also for the enterprise architecture and the IT strategy. So if you're thinking about what your investment priorities should be for information systems improvements, for example, you've got the performance in the simulation model that says this is how this part of the enterprise is actually performing given the information systems that are currently available to support that activity in the business. If we were to invest X $1,000 in an information system to improve this process by 20%, what would that do to the efficiency and effectiveness of that part of the enterprise system, and what would that do to the performance of the whole organization? So you can use this to actually evaluate and choose and prioritize your entire information systems portfolio. In principle, you can do that.
So logically, the placeholder for doing strategic dynamics would be the phase B, is what you're saying effectively.
Yeah.
Although there could be parts of it which you could do in the preliminary and the vision, but the most part of it happens in the business architecture.
Yeah. Well, what happens in the architecture vision? Typically, this is where management will make all kinds of grand statements about how great they want the business to be sometime out in the future, and this is step one of our models anyway, which is to convert that qualitative explanation of your ambition into a quantified time-based projection. By how much do we want the number of customers and our sales and our profits to grow over the next 5 years? What is the time path that we're trying to hit? So we're making the vision more concrete. We're not changing the vision. We're just putting some numbers and some timescale on it. And that's actually where we start when we're building one of these models anyway. So when you go to step B, you pick up those time charts and say, well, these are the results that we have to get out of our business model.
Okay. So there is a possibility, so from what you're saying is by playing around with the numbers in phase B, so there's a possibility that you can tweak your vision back in case you are wrong about your vision. So probably you can get a simulation from the B and you can go back to A and B as well.
Absolutely. There are two possibilities here, and quite common possibilities. The first is that the vision is completely unrealistic and unachievable when you build the model and say, what do you have to believe for these numbers to be achieved? You discover it's just completely impossible, and it's just a pipe dream in management's head. They'd love to be able to achieve it, but it just isn't going to happen. The other possibility is that when you build the model, you discover you could actually achieve far more than the vision says. Hey, there's a much bigger opportunity out here. And we've got a feasible way of capturing it. So it's a kind of quality assurance, if you like, on the vision that management set out in the first place. And by the time you get into part B here, you've got a model that shows how that future could be made to happen as well. And when you go around the rest of this process here, then you're continually checking how the performance of the organization is actually playing out, given all of the changes to the information system support that you're making from time to time, month to month, quarter to quarter, and year to year. So it continues to support the whole thing in the same way that it continues to support management in their day-to-day and week-to-week decision making on everything.
I think
you don't need a balanced scorecard. You don't need other key performance indicator systems. This model actually is a balanced scorecard, and it's a much better balanced scorecard than anything else you might build.
Okay, actually, from what you're saying, I could see that this could be used in phase G as well, at the time of implementation governance, where you're trying to operationalize all your stuff. So apart from strategic planning, it could be used for operational, driving operational results when, the whole thing hits the ground or the rubber meets the road, that kind of stuff. So you could pretty much use it there as well as in change management to some extent.
Absolutely.
So I think.
Since you mentioned that, Kieran, I'm just reminded of a project that some colleagues I work very closely with, a consultancy company who specialize in these models. They did a project actually for Microsoft for the software they use internally for some of their activities. And that project was precisely about making choices about the investment they make in deploying agile development methods in different parts of the organization. So you're exactly right. Yeah, you can dive into any functional area and start modeling out really quite operational decisions.
So I think once you get a hang of the framework and you know how to use it, you could pretty much plug in any part of the phase.
Sure. I should just say, of course, if you're going to do this whole thing, this is a really big enterprise. This is a big thing to take on. You would bake it into your enterprise architecture work from the start. More likely, I think, for many of your audience, you would do you would see opportunities to do a small version of this for particular issues or for particular parts of the business from time to time. I doubt that there are many large, sophisticated organizations out there who don't already have some form of enterprise architecture already in place. So you would be bolting on a system dynamic model to an enterprise architecture that already exists. But that there must be opportunities to do that and get value out of that to make better decisions about IT support and IT investment.
Okay. Kim, one more point is, are there any tools that will help you to create all of this stuff? Like, are you going to use Excel and spreadsheets to do this, or there are softwares out there
Oh,
that's available to do? I
right.
think we definitely dwell in that in the part two of the discussion, for sure.
Yes, yeah, I
But
will say more about this in part two. You cannot build these models with spreadsheets, right?
oh, okay.
Theoretically, um, the relationships, actually, Kieran, I'm just going to have to. Can you pause for a few minutes?
Yeah, sure.
The reason.
Yes, Kim, we are back again.
Okay. Yeah. So theoretically, it should be conceivable that you could build one of these models in a spreadsheet. In fact, we can export these models in a spreadsheet format, but it would be impossible to actually build a model of this kind with spreadsheet tools. So there are a number of very well established professional tools in the system dynamics field for building these models. And in the next talk, I will actually be using one of those tools, which I've had developed specifically to be kind of user friendly for a managerial audience. So yeah, there are tools to make this possible for people to do.
Thank you. Thanks, Kim. Thanks very much for your time. And shortly, we'll have the second talk wherein you're going to be diving deep into how to create strategic business models using the strategic dynamics framework. And you would take us through a live demo with the tool itself.
Well, I'll go as deep as it's possible to go in 45 minutes anyway.
Sure. Thanks a lot. And I'll link up the important links at the down of this below this video. I think once we're done with this, and
sure.
edit
Okay.
and upload.
Thank
you very much for your time, Kim. So stay safe, and we'll connect shortly for the second one.
Okay. Bye now.